iHeartland in Fortnite.
Yeah.
Now open.
Already know that.
Yeah.
The hottest concerts from the hottest artists.
Don't stop.
iHeartland in Fortnite. Games.
Yeah.
Friends. Fun.
One more time.
The hottest concerts from the hottest artists.
Don't stop.
iHeartland in Fortnite. Games.
Yeah.
Friends. Fun. Ready up and grab your squad.
Yeah.
Go to iHeartRadio.com/iHeartland to start playing.
Hey guys, I'm Kaylee Shore. On my podcast, Too Much to Say, I share my thoughts on everything from music to martinis, social media to social anxiety, regrets to risky texts, and so much more. I have been known to read my literal diary entries on my show, and sometimes I do interviews with my crazy group of friends. So if you guys want to tune in, you can hear new episodes of Too Much to Say every Wednesday on the Nashville Podcast Network, available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to them.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Oh boy, here we are today, gathered here around the altar of punk and hardcore and indie rock and emo and whatever DIY music scene you ascribe to have discussions with people who are involved in it, who are creating it, documenting it. I don't care what it is, as long as you are deeply involved, because that is meaningful to me, and I know it's meaningful to you. Today is a goddamn legend. And I do not use those words lightly. I know legend, like if people throw that around like hyperbole. Tim Barry from Avail. And the reason that, well, actually, I shouldn't even tell you the reason, because Tim Barry should be a legend. Avail looms large within the punk and hardcore ecosystem. They are a band that worked their tails off when they were out there touring some 250, 300 days out of the year, when touring was, obviously was happening in the early to mid 90s, but, wasn't as robust as it is now. And they were drawing so many people from so many different music scenes. And that is why I loved Avail. Every time that I saw them was like just this rad hodgepodge of people from all different music scenes coming there to have a good time, pump their fist in the air, sing along, circle pit, and I love Avail. At one point, I decided against it, actually, but I was considering an Avail tattoo. That's how much I enjoy this band, but I punished Tim Barry for quite some time, and then was able to link up with a publicist of his because they are promoting a re-release of Satiate, which is an incredible full length of theirs, very early on in the Avail career, but they're out promoting it, and you can easily find it on their Merch Now site, or you can listen to it on all the streaming platforms. But Avail, we're talking, 4 a.m. Friday, Over the James, so much great music, and Tim is very prolific still. He puts out a lot of great music under his name. I was going to say his moniker, but no, it's his name, Tim Barry. And Avail's playing some shows right now. It's incredibly exciting. So let's talk about favors that you can do for me, because, I'm giving you free stuff. And I understand you have to listen to ads and what have you, but like there are certain trade-offs that we're talking about here. And I would really greatly appreciate if you could go to your favorite podcast platform, namely either Spotify and or Apple Podcasts, give it a star rating and review. I know everyone asks you to do that, but like literally, I'm talking to you right now. You've probably listened to this show for, maybe a year or so, and are like, maybe I'll do this, maybe I won't. I'm just trying to push you over the edge today and be like, all right, give it those stars, and I would appreciate that. You can always also email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. That comes directly to me, and I will then become your best friend. That's not a promise, but, it may be a threat, because I tend to respond to emails punishingly fast. And then there are some times where I may just let it sit for a bit. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Let's talk to Tim Barry. Like I said, Avail is out there playing shows. They just re-released Satiate, an incredible full length of theirs. I pre-ordered that so fast on vinyl, and I got it. It's a great package. It's awesome. So go listen to Avail. Go celebrate Avail. And when you can see them, go see them, because they are an incredible band. And Tim Barry, I describe him as this. He's a salt of the earth dude. He just likes music, likes art, likes creating, likes existing in the world, and that makes me really happy. So here is the engaging conversation I had with Tim.
Trying to get out, not out there, thinking you're everything you said you would be.
something that I've always found very incredible about Avail is the fact that you guys are the ultimate connector band. And when I say that, and I know this will probably resonate with you, you pulled people from like every single scene imaginable. Like me growing up in the, Orange County straight edge hardcore scene, like my music tastes were, like varied, but not to the point that I was like, where we are now as adults or what have you. But when you were out there grinding it out in the road constantly in the mid to late 90s, you were pulling all these people from different scenes. And I know that that was like unintentional when you guys were first starting, but when did you maybe start to personally notice like, hey, we are drawing like these hardcore kids and like these, Liberty Spike punk kids, like everyone's in the same room together. And that is maybe not the most common thing. Or did you even notice that?
I don't think we even noticed it.
Okay.
I don't think we noticed that we were the Dolly Parton of punk.
That's good. I like that.
I think the guys in Avail are all so different that to see a room filled with those differences didn't seem abnormal to us. Our social life was really diverse. At home, our social life on the road was really diverse. We really were and continue to be an eclectic group of people. And you say like, there's punks and there's skins and there's hardcore kids, but there's also like, stereotypically normal people coming to the shows and metalheads and just what a neat mix. And I guess I didn't realize it, or I'm sure the other guys didn't realize it until people started talking about it. When Avail was like an unintentional slow grind, never becoming very popular, but maybe well known in a sort of niche of the underground. And in that slow grind comes more and more press. And I think back then, if I'd read something in, Maximum Rock and Roll or Punk Planet mentioning how different all the folks at the shows were, and how often they all got along. We all got along without too much conflict. I think that's probably when we realized that we were in that sort of bracket. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that continues, like back in the, I guess probably in the 70s or 80s, people attached to music like it was, their gang. If you go under bridges, you'll see people who've written like Led Zeppelin or Metallica and things like that. And that's almost like tribalizing. And I think what's important about music and art and, any sort of public outlet is that it should be a unifier, especially right now with how complicated the country is. I hope that, small little sparks of music or art or whatever really start bringing people back together again, even if it's just a small thing in the punk world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And I think I agree with your sentiment. And I think it's what made Avail that in my mind, and I know a lot of other people's minds, exactly what you were talking about. You were this, collection of weirdo misfits, which many people are in the punk and hardcore and DIY scene. But just the fact that people could attach themselves or see a version of themselves in what you guys are doing. And then that's where you're able to build that, big tent of camaraderie that it's like, it doesn't matter where we came from. We're all here. And that's what's the most important thing, which, I think that you guys, whether you were recognizing it or not, that's the embodiment that you were doing, where it's just like, oh, well, yeah, we'll go on tour with this band. Like, we just like them. They're our friends. Like,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And that's a really important thing that people should note, that those of us who don't play music publicly or don't tour, most musicians in retrospect are so full of shit. They make up what happened instead of realizing that it just happened. I think there's very few people who sit down and sort of draft what they want to happen with their musical quote unquote careers. I think for most of us, especially coming up in independent music in the underground in the 90s, we were just going full force, trying to get from one show to another in any way possible, and not realizing what that trail was leaving behind, whether it be positive or negative. And so like, it's super easy to look back on your accomplishments over a number of years of touring and releasing records and sort of rewrite it to calibrate your ego in it. But really, we had no idea at all what we were doing. We were just drawn to music for whatever reasons that we were. And it really is bizarre to think back on.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking like setting up tours. I used to set up tours on payphones, or I used a fax machine that Lookout Records sent us to set up our first tour of Europe in 1994 with Paula from the band Spitboy in the UK, sort of like orchestrating everything from her end. But we didn't have enough money to pay for the phone bills, so we faxed back and forth, which was a new technology, on this transparent paper that we copied the directions on that disappeared. And it, like in a time when there was no computers or no cell phones, and directions would simply be go to town, look for punks, and we'd play squats. And it's just remarkable to look back on the whole thing. And I'm not interested in sitting and like reinventing, like I woke up, put my shoes on, picked up my guitar, and wrote this great song. And this is where it comes from. That's bullshit. It just happened. Song popped up. Some people liked it. We went on the road.
Right. You operate. I mean, and I think that idea of operating off of instinct is what it enables you to obviously follow. I mean, sounds so highfalutin, but like follow your muse, and it's like, that's what you're doing. That's what you have been doing with your own solo project. You were following what your instinct and what the songs will make of it, as opposed to, but the common trajectory of people getting out of punk, or, and I use that in air quotes, but like, oh, I got to be a folk guy now. It's like, no, this is just what you are and what you always have been. Yeah.
I mean, personally, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
people, I think the key word that you used is instinct. I mean, if I'm just speaking about myself and not Avail as a whole, is all the songs that I have written personally would have been written whether anyone was listening or not. And for whatever reasons, music and writing is one of my many sort of, I wouldn't call them hobbies, just things that occur in my life seasonally. So, like I'll spend the winter writing for whatever reason. I've always been like that. In fact, I was just at my mom's house and I played her and all the cousins, my first song that I ever wrote, which went, go to school every day. Don't know why it don't pay. This sucks. This sucks. This sucks. This sucks. And I wrote that when I was 14, and I never stopped writing shitty songs. But it's also very important to note that Avail's writing was very, collaborative. We all wrote. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of putting the focus on you as an individual, I know you were born and raised in Northern Virginia, and it was kind of an unconventional scenario from what I understand it in regards to, I wouldn't maybe go so far as to label it as a commune, but I've, read you describing your, kind of freewheeling existence as a kid. Is that correct, or am I completely off base?
Commune? No.
Okay.
No. Northern Virginia, it's impossible to explain Northern Virginia in 2022 because
Sure.
It's so different than it was when we were kids. Not all of Avail, but much of Avail lived in, when we left Northern Virginia, was from a planned community in Fairfax County. But it sort of had a utopian ideal that didn't come to fruition because of its proximity to Washington, D.C. and the availability of, sort of like, there wasn't building codes and districts and whatnot that made it develop in a way that was unforgivable. And so it's so far removed from where we are now that it almost seems irrelevant. I mean, when we left, my brother was down here. None of us were doing anything. I was laying carpet in Northern Virginia, and my dad signed a lease for us for a sort of apartment here in Richmond. And really, Avail, although it started in high school with a group of friends who sort of we kind of circled around in different bands, it really didn't start until the record Dixie. Like even Satiate, which we're I guess we're supposed to talk about today, which was the first record, is like right when it's just Avail is just starting to find its way, after many lineup changes and whatnot.
Right, for sure. And I know your family structure. Like, do you have brothers and sisters? Correct, right?
Yeah.
My
sister is here. My brother is now up north in Jersey.
Okay,
sorry, New York State.
Got it. And I know you were exposed to music at a pretty early age in regards to you attending the Catholic Church and your parents being in a choir and stuff like that. When had music kind of seeped into you? I know because of that, but like, did you like it and identify with it? Where it's like, oh, that's cool. They're singing. Like, I like the way that music sounds.
No, not at church. I hated it. And the music that my parents played at church, it's a Catholic church, and my family's pretty Irish, but it is not an Irish Catholic church. There was a banjo player, a bass player, and I call it the Guitar Army. And they sang these sort of contemporary versions of Christian songs. It was very rebellious in the eyes of the normal Catholic Church. And looking back on that, that's pretty damn cool. My mom was definitely like an earth mother and whatnot. But really, my interest in music, the path that I ended up on was blazed by my older brother, James. My sister's much younger, and she's a musician. My brother is a composer, and my sister is a violin player. And somewhere I felt right in the middle of all that. When I was a kid, my dad was sent over to England for some training, and the whole family went. And that's where I kind of took off with music. It was a whole nother fucking level for me. I was a preteen, and my dad was busy, and he gave my brother and I, who's 2 years older, subway passes, tube passes, and we just did whatever the hell we want. It's where I started drinking beer at a very young age, and
right.
Where I saw my first punk show. It's where I first fell in love with metal music. And this is before metal was really mainstream, or before like the glam shit took over the MTV world in the 80s in the United States. So I got to see Metallica at the very beginning of the Ride the Lightning tour in a club that was about 1,200 capacity, like front row. I got to see Iron Maiden. The first show I saw was Iron Maiden on the World Slavery Tour at Hammersmith Odeon in 1984. I did not make it to see The Clash, although my brother went and brought me a T-shirt. I sat outside the show at Brixton Academy. I saw a French punk band at the Marquee. I had no idea what punk was. I was a metalhead, so I packed to the front so that I could headbang. And then suddenly a circle pit broke out, and it was one of the most utterly confusing things I'd ever witnessed. And obviously it's hard to put this in perspective, but that was when slam dancing was still like a secret culture, like a part of a secret society. It hadn't been blown up by Nirvana on MTV yet. So it was really enticing and interesting to understand how it worked. So that's the direction. And then when I came back to Virginia After that, I was a full-blown metalhead. And from there, I got into thrash. And then there was a crossover between like punks, skaters, and the metalheads. In fact, that was intentional because there was so much conflict in that area and so many fights that we sort of banded together as a safety in numbers sort of thing. And that's what united the punks and the skins and the metalheads and the skaters. It's like a defensive thing.
Sure, sure.
And there you go. Then I started playing drums and playing in bands, all in high school, metal bands with my brother, mainly. And then I ended up in a band that was heavily influenced by the groups that came out of your area in Southern California, heavily influenced by RKL and heavily influenced by the Adolescents. I was in a band called LDK, which is an acronym for Learning Disabled Kids, because we all were. And I was a speed metal drummer who ended up in that band and quit the band when I got locked up for a little bit. Or maybe I got locked. Maybe I quit the band.
Maybe the locked up part made you not be in the band. Yeah.
Anyway, when I came out, I was asked to be the drummer in Avail. And that's how and Avail was in that loose group of misfits that played music in different bands. And I don't remember what happened to whoever was playing the drums at that point. But then I started drumming in Avail.
Drumming in Avail, yeah.
And there was a different singer, and it was Joe, me. The only members from back then are Joe and I.
Right. And the I know that, like you mentioned, as you were, kind of putting together all of these, musical collections and getting exposed to all that, I'm going to presume that school was not ever an important part of your life. Did you ever? Yeah. Okay.
No, I was the guy on the BMX bike I looked like I was in municipal waste. So right. I but an OG. So I was the guy on the BMX bike with the pack of Marlboro Reds in his battle vest with a Venom patch on the back that was selling you LSD and weed and riding around on my BMX bike. So no, school wasn't anything of interest to me. In fact, I don't want to be too long-winded here if we're talking about Avail so much, but I really couldn't even read when I got out of high school. In fact, it was the person who helped Avail put our first record out that really encouraged me to see what I was trying to put together when I was looking at words. And right. we should touch on that. So no, school was not a thing.
Right. And I'm going to guess that because of that, the, life path as far as, I'm going to, go to college and get a career, all that stuff was not even part of the radar as well.
No. I mean, I took classes at the community college here, but mainly things that I was interested in, like African-American history and things like that. And that was more me just trying to learn. I've always believed that I don't need to pay people I don't need to get in debt to learn things. So I would do back then is I would choose topics and study them on my own, 6 months of auto mechanics, or I'd read about feminism for a year or anything, all kinds of interesting shit, mainly history though.
Right. And and I find that, interesting and compelling because that was probably in conjunction with you learning about all of these different, not only musical styles, but then a lot of these bands were bringing a different perspective, whether it was politically or socio-economically or whatever. So you were just trying to expand your world at a rapid pace, I'm guessing.
I guess I was.
Yeah.
I mean, I was really interested in punk rock, the whole community of it. I think when you grow up in a place like Northern Virginia, you lack identity. And I finally felt like I had a group of friends. I had a culture. We celebrated when we went to shows. We cared about our community. And in doing so, we were active in it. It felt good as a young person to really be active. And Richmond was very small then. It was a very small community. And I think not Avail, but I think like the whole group of active people in Richmond did a lot of good back then and planted a lot of seeds that came to fruition recently.
Oh boy, you know what time it is? It's Rockabilia time, and this code is going to get you 10% off your order, 100 words or less. And what does Rockabilia do? They ship you all of the latest and greatest band merch that you could possibly shake a stick at. I don't care what band you're into, they have it, and they have multiple different designs. They have all of your favorite stuff right there at your fingertips, ships quick to you from the Midwest, and it's all independently owned and operated. They've been in business for over 30 years. I think they should have like a really cool 35th or 40th anniversary, or who knows, maybe it might have even been longer. But regardless, Rockabilia is a website that you need to go to. You will have so much fun on there. I do it probably like once a month. I just get lost in there for a good 20 minutes or so, and then end up filling my cart and checking out and having a lot of fun with it. So rockabilia.com, 100 words or less is the promo code. Thank you so much for your continued support, and buy band merch. It's important.
Ready, set, slay! Squirrel Friends, the official RuPaul's Drag Race podcast, is taking you behind the scenes of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 15 on MTV with me, Alec Mappa, and my co-host, Lonnie Love.
Alec and I will recap the latest episode, the best and worst looks, and we'll even be joined by some of your favorite queens along the way.
One thing's for sure, there is no shortage of queens this season, because we are witnessing the biggest cast in RuPaul's Drag Race history, and the stakes are higher than ever with the largest cast prize in Drag Race history. So make no mistake, the competition is going to rev up.
Watch Season 15 of RuPaul's Drag Race every Friday on MTV. Then join us on the podcast right after the show to recap the episode, debrief on all the looks, and more.
Listen to Squirrel Friends, the official RuPaul's Drag Race podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's interesting to hear you say that too, because I think everybody that, rose to prominence as far as, touring and playing shows and stuff like that, waves the flag for Richmond so high because it was, so small, and then it grew, over time, but then there was always that connectivity to a city in ways that, like Louisville or, other places around the country that have that same kind of spirit about their scenes. And they're like, oh yes, of course I'm from Richmond. Like, yes, like we're going to talk about it.
And it's funny. It's weird how you become how people see you. So as we're traveling around pre-internet, it's confusing to people that you're not from like LA or New York or Boston or one of the big cities. And you say you're from Richmond or even Virginia, no one knows where the fuck it is. Because we're not all traveled. We haven't spent, we're not all connected yet. It's so new. It's so different. And then they label you. I would read articles and it would say Avail, tattooed Dixie punks,
right,
and things like that. And you're like, okay, well, I guess that's what I am now. And then you kind of with it, you become how people see you. And so in that, it was okay for us to say, you know what, we are from this shitty fucking city where it's horribly violent. It's crime ridden. The houses we lived in were absolutely insane. The shit that happened around them, people being killed. A lot hasn't changed in a lot of neighborhoods, and to say, you know what, no, we're not living in New York City or Los Angeles or San Francisco. We live in Richmond, Virginia, and that's what's up. And
yeah,
you want to
reckon with that.
And if you want to get into details, 7 of us share a house for $425 a month for the whole house, and that's also where our band practices, and that's where we store all our merchandise. So do the math. If you can live with crack, then you can live in Richmond.
Right. And honestly, I think because of that life experience and the way that you guys, approach not only, the music that you played, but it was and I mean this in a non-pejorative sense, like it was a very cult-like experience where it's like, hey, we'll welcome you into the poor, hungry and ugly, happy, like, we'll introduce you to that community, as long as you're willing to follow along and not judge us based off of that. And I think that it really did inspire people to follow you guys in a way that, many other bands like didn't reach that level of dedication to,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that you've spoken about this before as well in regards to kind of being the de facto manager, like once the touring started to happen and, dealing with booking agents and, people like working with record labels. I knew that like really, and you've expressed it, it ground you down to where it was like, this is not a fun part of being in a band. Was there a time that you, I guess, enjoyed that aspect of it? Or was it always kind of like I guess we have to do this?
Well, for whatever reason, I've always taken that role. A lot of the networking that Avail gained was that I set up shows in Richmond starting in 1990. So, I was setting up shows for Born Against and Rorschach and Neurosis and Clutch and endless amounts of bands that would come through. And so we made a lot of friends. And I think because of me having those connections from setting up shows, it became just normalized for me to be the one who reached out for paybacks. And yeah, eventually I couldn't handle the booking, and I was using Adam Nathanson, who's actually my favorite lyricist of all time, who is the singer for Young Pioneers and a member of the band Born Against. Born Against had gone on a 11-week U.S. tour in Canada too with Rorschach, and at the end of the tour, he sent a list of phone numbers of the shows that went well, and between that list and contacts I'd made setting up shows, we started touring. And I don't remember what year it was, maybe 94. Margie Albin of Do It Booking started handling us, and she still books my shows and Avail shows to this day. Mm-hmm. And yeah, at some point I just hated it. Bo will boast in his way of he was the only member that in between tours had to work. So we'd come home from tour and he'd wash dishes or whatever. But like, my response to that would be, I would have loved to have the opportunity to work between tours.
Right.
But I was stuck at home managing Avail. And management is a thankless job. It causes nothing but conflict. And I never was able to sort of resign the position till the end, till I consciously stopped being
right.
Avail. And I don't have any regrets about it. I learned so much. I mean, I manage my music now, which is a lot more work than Avail was, except that I don't have to check everything with a bunch of people to make it
happen. You're the ultimate decider. There's only one voice you need to listen to. That's exactly. The one inside your head. Yeah. So, as you started to, grow in popularity and have, I just know from watching you guys over the times that I did, where you started to play larger shows and you started to be put in environments that were, comfortable, but still maybe outside of what you had previously done. Was there, did you feel the excitement, or was it one of those things that you were too kind of focused on, getting to the next show, that the appreciation maybe wasn't recognized or there, or did you enjoy it as you were going through it?
I don't know. It's so weird because I don't remember it getting popular.
Okay.
Although if I look back at pictures, it's like we were just talking about the living room in Santa Barbara, and it's 30 people there or whatever. But at some point there was a lot more. And and I do remember the break, the where Avail sort of transitioned. There was two things. This is really important. Avail refused to do support tours until 1998. Avail never did a support tour. So where the standard in the music business, say for me right now, is to get an offer to play a bunch of shows with Brian Fallon. And in doing so, if I'm opening for Brian, I'm exposed to a whole new audience. Or Frank Turner, and I get to go to England and open for Frank Turner for 3 weeks, exposing me to all of his fans in England. Avail never did that. So all the way until 1998, we did that by word of mouth without the internet and social networks. So it was just talking, and we played every single tiny little town that you can imagine. And eventually, all of that came back to us when we released a record in 1998 called Over the James, which I wouldn't call a breakthrough record as much as it is sort of like the most popular we became. It was our peak as sort of like numbers go, probably with record sales and definitely with show turnout. And that is the year that we first did a support tour. And we spent 5 weeks in Europe on our own, and then came back after a one-day break and opened for the Suicide Machines on a 5-week tour. I think it was 5 weeks, and it was fucking fantastic. And they became lifelong friends. And I think that's sort of because we bonded so much with them and the shows were so great. I think that sort of flipped our switch with opening for bands. And we never stopped doing it. So, but when we sort of peaked, I don't think we realized anything that was going on. I remember Vanessa Burt from Mutiny PR, who was working at FAT at some point, had me doing like a press day in New York City, and there was a line down the block of people to get quotes from me. And I think that's when I was like, this is getting a little weird.
Right. Yeah. It's like, this many people want to talk to me. This is weird.
Yeah. And that was right around Over the James, but we never got popular in our heads. We were still just this weird dysfunctional group of people who toured in a really old Econoline with pulling a trailer on our own, with, two close friends as roadies. So, I think popularity, so much of it, we kept ourselves in check so much that I don't think we saw anything but the next show. I mean, really on tour, you don't have time to sit and digest it. Your goal is to get as much rest as you can so that you can just kill it on stage to do it all over again. It's just getting through the day.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, especially too, where you were existing, like you said, in the world of word to mouth and obviously pre-internet and all that sort of stuff. Like there isn't as many inputs of people telling you that like, oh my gosh, like, you're going to be the next biggest band or whatever. Like, yes, of course, some of that can echo back to you, but then, you're not going to take it seriously. So that idea is not going to embed itself where you're thinking about it and making your creative decisions based around that, as opposed to, just following everything that you were doing previously.
Exactly. And so our brain function has changed in the last 20 years. So there is no getting off stage and seeing the reaction instantly on your phone. Do you know what I'm saying? There is
absolutely.
There is no like, how did that show go? Pick up your phone, see how many more followers you have on Instagram. It was just like us in the dressing room being like, oh man, we got to slow down the tempo on Southbound 95. You know what I mean? Or like,
totally. Like, I can't sing that fast, guys. Slow down.
Like, I'm losing my voice really bad, so I'm going to go to the van because I can't talk anymore. But so yeah, like you say, like, like your musical output changing based on the reaction of the crowd. Man, that happened to us because people, they had a loyalty and a stereotype with records. And record labels, and Lookout Records was very eclectic, and that's what Avail was on for the good years. I'll just call them the good years, but the three albums that people most associate with like the real Avail is Dixie, 4 a.m. Friday, and Over the James.
Yep.
And those are the Lookout years, and the record label was run so well and so ethically by Larry Livermore, who really, really has always had his heart in the right place. Had such a neat group of music coming out of that record label, and I felt like we were really a part of that. But when we switched over to Fat Records, now you got to think like late 90s Fat Records, people only associate it with a certain fast melodic pop punk style. And I think that the sort of like word around was that we were going that direction. And I really do think that influenced us on our first Fat Records release, where we were like, actually, fuck y'all. We're not going that direction. We're going to become like a harder, heavier, hardcore band. And that's where I think we started just going downhill. When you start thinking about how people see you, it's not good. Like, it's just in life in general. And we really just have to be who we are. And again, like you say, I love that you use the word instinct. I don't have that in my vocabulary enough. Where before we were writing by instinct or by influence, where you have like a guitar player who's riffing Leonard Skinner songs that he grew up playing, or a bass player who's pulling bass melodies from Rites of Spring or other great DC bands, and you have a drummer who hits like Dave Grohl before we even heard Nirvana and is heavily influenced by DC music and metal. And then you have this crazy skinhead, Navy deserter, Bo, who is just way into Southern California punk. And then me, who just likes folk music, like country and folk music. We are going to write by instinct, and it's going to be eclectic, and it's going to be fucking different. But when we start writing or being who, like just trying to do something because we're looking at ourselves, how people may judge us, that's where things just start going downhill. And I mean that in life in general, not just with music. We really can't let people influence us, because things just start going weird.
It's hard. No, no one is immune to it, because it definitely, like you said, when you can positively lean into the expectations of what people want from you, you could end up writing the same record 8 times in a row, which for some bands is fine, but for others, it's like, we're bored. We don't need to do that anymore. But then on the flip side is exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, okay, well, we're signing to Fat, but we're going to be, we're not going to be like No Use for a Name and every other band on the label, because we're going to be, hard or whatever. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. Definitely pivotal in my eyes, in retrospect, looking back on Avail. That's about where I started. I had a lot of personal struggles at that point. And then when I kind of came out of them, I was like, I just don't know that I like this anymore.
Yeah, right. I had a moment to think about it.
Yeah, well, I didn't even really. I just, it was funny. Like Bo, who is, we've been close friends since kindergarten, and I remember, his greatest goal with music, because he was like, I have a goal, and my goal is that if I ever get to play a show in California, I will be done with music happily. And that's a pretty great goal, because we accomplished that, I believe, in 92, maybe 93. I can't perfectly remember. But he and I both sort of made a pact that if this becomes a job or it's not fun, then we should stop.
Yep.
And I remember playing in Richmond So Avail put out 2 records on Fat Records, and then I had given up management. I just completely was over it. And I really curated the tours. Like, I really put in a lot of effort to make them really eclectic and fun for everybody. And then I stopped doing the tours, and we went on this tour. It was a disaster. It was like nobody fucking came to the shows. This last tour actually was great. It was Darkest Hour. Was it Darkest Hour? No, it was American Nightmare. I don't know. That was a good tour. It was.
Yeah.
Well, but anyway, I got to the Richmond show, and I remember getting off stage and looking at my now ex-wife in the backstage, and I was like, that's the last time I'm ever doing that. And I just walked out of the venue and left. And I didn't do it again until these reunion shows.
Yeah, sure. And I know something that has been probably, romanticized to a certain extent, but then also, in actuality, like the train hopping and living frugally, has always been something that you have made public and people are aware of that about you. Was that kind of just like hardwired in you? Like the attraction to that, that's not meant for everybody. It's funny. I was driving my 10-year-old son to school today, and I was telling him that I was speaking to you, and I, told him about kind of, the culture of train hopping and stuff like that. And he was like, that sounds so cool. And I'm like, I know it is pretty cool.
No,
yeah, I know, exactly. It's like, well, in certain extent it is, but, was that something that was always not just the train hopping, but like I said, the living frugally and all that sort of stuff? Was that just kind of always who you were?
I think, like, if you go in my brother's bathroom and you look at his toothpaste, he'll roll it until there's not one drop left. And if you go by my sister's house right now, she'll happily point out all of the things she got on her free Facebook group the day before, like one of those, like, like buy nothing groups.
Sure.
And if you come to my house, I have 2 kids, and we live in a 900 square foot house. And I'm not saying this to boast, because it's almost embarrassing, but they each have a bedroom and I sleep on the couch, and that's how we live. And I really don't have anything. I mean, I have an old pickup truck and my dad van, which is a Grand Caravan, but I don't say any of that to boast. I just, maybe at some point in my life, I just like was looking at all the excess, and maybe it started getting to me. Honestly, I don't know how to explain myself. My neighbors think I'm a maniac. My neighbor Grace is one of my closest friends, and she's just like, you're a maniac. Like, you're insane. But here's the thing, is just like, less is more in my life. I am happier when things are quiet, and I read books that are made of paper, and I'm not on social media, and I'm outside, and I'm in the woods, and eating well, and
that's where you're happiest.
I mean, it's like, I don't know if that's frugal or simplistic, but that's just how that brings me joy. And that's it. So if that's how I present myself, it's because it's the truth. And I've had a lot of different living situations, and I've been in a lot of parts of my life where sort of like that frugalness is a necessity. But like, so train riding and stuff like that is like, that is voluntary. So many people live on the road, and I can't get off the road. My whole life is constantly leaving to come and going away. It's just like constant. But all of that exploration I did riding trains, or like hitchhiking or walking or whatever, was very voluntary. Maybe I couldn't control myself, but I could always have come home. I have a great mom and dad. I have my sister. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have friends. So if I needed something, they were here. Whatever compelled me to be on the road all the time is just my own nonsense.
Ready? Set Slay! Squirrel Friends, the official RuPaul's Drag Race podcast, is taking you behind the scenes of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 15 on MTV with me, Alec Mappa, and my co-host, Lonnie Love.
Alec and I will recap the latest episode, the best and worst looks, and we'll even be joined by some of your favorite queens along the way.
One thing's for sure, there is no shortage of queens this season, because we are witnessing the biggest cast in RuPaul's Drag Race history, and the stakes are higher than ever with the largest cast prize in Drag Race history. So make no mistake, the competition is going to rev up.
Watch Season 15 of RuPaul's Drag Race every Friday on MTV. Then join us on the podcast right after the show to recap the episode, debrief on all the looks, and more.
Listen to Squirrel Friends, the official RuPaul's Drag Race podcast, on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Standing at 8 feet 2 inches tall, Charles Byrne was the tallest man in the world. In fact, it earned him the nickname the Irish Giant, and when Charles arrived in London in 1782, he caused quite a stir. But by May the following year, death came calling for Charles in the form of tuberculosis. And while most people were ready to mourn his passing, one man was plotting with gleeful excitement for a chance to dissect the Irish Giant's remains. This January, Grim and Mild Presents will shift focus from the great wide world around us to the universe inside us all. In a journey that will span thousands of years and countless borders, we plan to unpack the dark and twisted history of healing medicine. So wash your hands, set out your tools, and prep for surgery. Grim and Mild Presents Bedside Manners is available now. Find Grim and Mild Presents wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at grimandmild.com/presents.
Right. Well, I like that description of just like this, this is an accurate portrayal, because I know that there is that, notion of like, I want to display myself as something, but then that isn't actually, like if you were like, oh yeah, like, the nomadic lifestyle of, traveling and hopping on trains and stuff. Like I actually only did that once, but then you made that your quote unquote brand. Like that's a whole different story than who you actually are.
Yeah. So like if you come to a show that I play now, I don't talk about train riding because I don't ride trains anymore. I might say like I woke up in the van this morning and blah, 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 because I sleep in the van almost every night. But like, and that's, in its own way, that's a form of homelessness. If you're on tour for 3 weeks and you're sleeping in your van every night, it's a weird, lonely, strange world. But I'm so used to it. Now I'm a migratory bird. I mean, I seasonally travel. It's like the same routes and I've done it for so long. But yeah, it's just who I am. And I don't expect people to care either way. But yeah, if you come to a show now, I'll probably talk more about my kids than I would train riding. In so many of my songs, this is where Avail started really grinding on me too. I wrote a whole song, drums, bass, guitar, and vocals of a Avail song called West Y. Y is spelled W-Y-E. It's a railroad term. And I wrote the song in first person, but it's not about me. It's about a train rider, a freight train rider. It was sort of my first train song that I made public, although I've been listening to train songs my whole life and obsessed with trains my whole life. Mainly like Woody Guthrie and Jimmy Rogers and Utah Phillips and whatnot. But people took that song way wrong. They thought, this guy is writing this first person song and it's like about him. And I was like, this sucks. Like I can't even tell like a story, you know what I mean, without being judged, not just by the people who were listening to Avail, but by my bandmates. And it was just like, all right, this is weird. I can't write a folk song in a punk band.
Right. I got to figure out how to separate these two things.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And this kind of harkens back to a little bit of what we were talking about previously, where waving the flag for Richmond but then constantly living that nomadic lifestyle of what you were talking about. I'm sure you have tried and have ebbed and flowed within the balance of being present in Richmond versus being a nomad and being on tour and stuff like that. You know, how has that affected you, I guess, as a person? Because I'm sure there's been times where you've been away and been like, this is hell. I need to get like to the river. And then vice versa, where it's like you're on the river and you're like, I got to get out there.
Yeah, my whole life has been that way. It's crazy. There has been an incredible push or pull. I've always thought, you know, I'm always in a rush to get home. And then once I'm here, I don't know what the rush was.
Sure.
And that's the only way I can sum it up.
Yep.
And then I'm ready to go again. And so if I'm between tours with Avail and management stuff is caught up and I hear, you know, a train symbols change, I'm like, well, I'm going to try to ride this train to this new location. And back then I had like, I don't know, I had all these weird ways of doing it where I'd had thrift store bikes that I locked up in different towns so I could ride trains to different towns and I'd have a bike and and set up a new camp and all you know, yeah. And then, you know, like nowadays I do the same thing with the kids. It's like, I just like, let's go camping. And camping might be going on the north side of the river directly across from our house and sleeping in tents or going upriver or, you know, going to a cabin or something like that. So hopefully I'm not instilling that too much in my children. But I think contemporary American culture is very rootless and very nomadic. So many people move. I mean, we move in circles. I know very few people who are born and stayed in Virginia. We're all over the place. And I think that goes for all states.
Sure. And much has been made about, from a press perspective in regards to, you know, Avail coming back and playing shows. And especially just because I know a lot of people like to rub in your face of like, oh, Tim, you said you would never get back and play with Avail, which I think is so funny that people like to mention that. But so how have you seen kind of like the legacy of the band reflected back on you in regards to just having all of I know the monumental moments of just like, oh, we're only selling hard tickets. And then that show sells out. It's like, oh, all these weird things that I know that you had no inkling was going to happen. You know, so how does that kind of like ping pong in your head? Or is it simply just another cool show that you get to play?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's hilarious how people feel like they can control another person by bringing up things that they've done.
Totally.
Because I just don't give a fuck. Like, I really don't care. And I said this to Nick from No Lies, podcast, No Lies Just Bullshit podcast when I first announced the Avail shows, was like, I reserve the right to change my opinion whenever the hell I want. And I owe nothing to anyone other than my small family and I. To leave that behind, the Avail reunion shows were really exciting. I mean, like, as I was saying earlier, like, we spent our whole many years driving around in a van playing every little teeny town in the world, and we had no idea the impact that it had on so many people. You know, when you play a trailer park in Biloxi, Mississippi for 20 people, you don't realize the impact it has on them. Or you play in a small town in Iowa or Danville, Illinois, or, you know, like, you just don't realize what people take from it. And I think what I realized with the Avail shows, the reunion shows that happened in July of 2019, is that all of those people came back together to celebrate. And I always believe, first and foremost, that music is a form of celebration. And I felt that at the shows, the energy was really there. And all of the people who traveled from all over the place, including abroad, that came to celebrate. And it was really remarkable, especially now after 2 years of pandemic, that a lot of us won't see each other again. And that makes those events really perfectly timed and far more meaningful. that we all got to get together again. But yeah, the absurdity of like technology and how the shows sold out so quickly was very new to me. I mean, I have solo shows sell out, but they do it slowly. Well, occasionally they'll sell out really quick, but like, I mean, like the first, so we are humble people. Avail had holds. That means that we had venues available at the National, which is a 1,200 capacity club. The next day at the National was held. That's the same 1,200 capacity club. But because the guys in Avail were so unconfident about selling out the 1,200 capacity club, we had other venues in Richmond on hold that were far smaller, 500 capacities and 250 capacities and stuff like that, because the confidence wasn't there that people would really even care. So the first show, the way the music business plans it is the first show goes on sale. It's a Friday show. The show goes on sale. If it sells out and it seems like there's a lot of excitement about it, you'll put tickets on sale for the second show, which would be at the big venue or the small venue, depending on how excited people are. So the first show goes on sale, and I guess it sold out in under 20 seconds. And then there's quickly, because nobody can ever just say, oh my God, congratulations, that's really exciting. People had to say, robots bought the tickets. And did you hear this?
Yeah, I did. And yeah, you're like, what does that even mean? Right.
Well, no, I do know what it means, but they're like, bots bought the tickets. It's impossible this band that toured for 20 years could actually sell out a 1,200 capacity show in 20 seconds. It's like, why is everybody so spiteful and angry and filled with assumption? It's so strange. Why can't you just say congratulations?
Totally.
So the promoter and our agent and the venue went through the sales to make sure that it wasn't bots, and it was they were all real people who bought the tickets. But what we noticed was that for whatever reason, however algorithms work or whatever ticket things, online ticket outlets work, many Richmonders didn't get tickets, or Central Virginians, which is disappointing. So we put tickets on sale for the Saturday show, but in person. So people started driving overnight from Florida and Boston and all these places. And that's where the celebration really started, in the streets of Richmond on Broad Street, and circling around the block at the venue, the National, was people just there all night, and they all had something in common. And that's where like the real reunion started. And that show sold out in person by people actually like buying tickets at the box office. And that bond that was created there is really what I think represents Avail. Overall,
no,
from beginning to end.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that, I mean, even as a person, like I did not attend those shows, but like just seeing that and feeling that celebratory nature, it really, even from 3,000 miles away, it very much felt like what I experienced, watching you at various places in Southern California, where it's just like, oh, Avail's in town. Not only do I have to go, but I know this is going to be a wild celebration. And like, that's, that is part of the legacy that is pretty cool to be able to, witness so many years later, to where it's like, oh, it still is the same feeling. Like that's a positive thing, and not just like purely a nostalgia trip. This is like you said, a celebration.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And really to really nail it down is like, it's when the band becomes bigger than just the 5 middle-aged white dudes who are playing the music. It's the whole community.
Yep.
That you can't have something like that unless everyone's in it.
Yep. Oh, totally. And the last thing I want to hit on was the fact that, I know, like you mentioned your kids a couple of times, and just like existing in this very, unconventional space of, DIY punk and hardcore. And then, like you said, your neighbors look at you like you are a crazy person because you live in a 900 square foot, place. So how do you feel like that purview has affected, like your parenting? Do you find yourself, because, clearly I imagine at one point your parents were looking at the, weird music you were bringing home and being like, what the hell is Tim into? And I'm sure you're maybe more permissive with your kids. So I realize there's a big question in there, but just that idea of like how all of your experiences are kind of like leaning into your kids.
I don't know, but I never really thought about what my mom was thinking when I was listening to Venom at War with Satan.
Totally. I'm sure it's hilarious.
She probably was like, what is wrong with my son? I would go to church with a shirt that said, look at me, Satan's child, born of evil, dust defiled.
So good.
Church, poor mom. I heard recently somebody talk about the two styles of parenting, and I can't really touch on it because I don't know much about this concept, but just these two words really resonate with me, that there's the carpenter style of parenting where it's really mapped out and it's really done with precision and intent. And then there's the version that I am, which is the gardener who puts the seed in the ground and sees what grows and notes that if there's not enough rain, it needs water. And if there's not enough sun, you need to intervene, and that the harvest can be so different from the year before. I really don't know what I'm doing as a parent other than really going by instinct. And it's with the coming of my first daughter, my 9-year-old Leela Jane, I started to learn how to actually practice patience. And Coralie and her have taught me so much about myself. And really, I don't see my life as very different from anybody else's until somebody says, like, your kids have a really unique perspective of the world. And I don't know if that's a compliment or if it's an insult.
Sure.
But they're both very smart, and I learn a lot from them. I probably get more from them than they'll ever know. And I have been lucky to have had incredible life experiences, and I've been lucky to have traveled all around the world and played everything from massive festivals to tiny squats. And I continue to do those things. But this morning driving to school, I was trying to explain to Leela how different her daddy is compared to so many other people. But really, like, with all of my life experiences, my greatest accomplishment is being a dad. There's just no other way to put it.
Yeah, no, it's a really, the reason I like to ask that question in particular is because I think that generationally speaking, this music scene has existed long enough to where, you are seeing, kids of people that started to go to shows, in the 80s and 90s or whatever. And there's no way that you can't spill that onto your kids, both positive and negatively, like every other life experience. But I do think that this, especially the DIY nature, it's not like, you asked permission to start Avail, you just did it. And, and so I like that idea of reflecting it on, the next generation of like, what are the things that they are going to do that they are not going to ask permission for, and just do it. And, we'll all be back being like, wow, what the hell was that? That's crazy.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see what they did. I mean, all kids. I can't wait. I can't wait for them to take over. I can't wait to sit back and make them feed me and watch their show or see their art or read their book. I can't wait. We have a very challenging world right now, and I'm excited to see what these young and smart and proactive younger, small people are going to pull off. I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, totally. Well, Tim, I really appreciate you hanging out, and thanks for letting me ping pong around your brain. It's been great.
Oh man, I don't talk enough. So that was what a trip. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna close this fucking computer and walk straight down to the train yard too.
Of course, dude. Yeah, an hour. You're like, this is good, man. This is all I got in me.
That's as much time as I like being on the computer.
Wasn't that just a treat, Mr. Tim Barry? I wasn't nervous per se heading into this conversation, but I definitely was like, oh man, I hope Tim's down to chat. And within 5 minutes, I was like, this dude is the realest of the real, and I love it. So thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much, James, his publicist. And like I said, go pick up that Satiate re-release of that great record from Avail and support Tim Barry forever. Because, you should. He's a great musician and a road warrior, as it were. Next week is going to be a little touch and go because I'm actually switching podcast servers. So you may not get a new episode next week, or if you do, it will be like a day or two early. So I promise, just follow along with this podcast and you will be able to get a new episode delivered right to your ear holes as long as you follow it. If not, then I'll punish you some other way to listen to the show. But in any event, next week there will be an episode. It will just be a little bit different schedule. So that's what I got, and I'm not telling you who it is this week because there's the little influx there. So keep you in suspense or something like that. But anyways, until next week, please be safe, everybody.
Hey, Mike. Glad you could join me for some great seafood.
Me too.
Wait, why are you dressed in fishing gear?
You said we were going out to catch great seafood, right?
Yes, to Popeyes. Do you even know how to fish?
No, I thought you did.
Oh, yeah, I can catch pretty good seafood at Popeyes. Let's go.
Let Popeyes do the fishing while you enjoy our delicious signature seafood. Get Popeyes Flounder Fish Sandwich or Shrimp Tackle Box before they're gone. Limited time at participating U.S. restaurants.
Get ready for this because it is here. iHeartland has arrived in Fortnite. I mean, you're going to see tons of concerts from huge artists like Charlie Puth. You can race, build, and even parkour, and find cool spots to meet up with fellow players and brag about how many dubs you've racked up. So ready up, jump into Fortnite, and check out iHeartland and Discover, now open. Visit iHeartRadio.com/iHeartland to start playing.
iHeartRadio.
Hey, it's Megan Devine, host of Hereafter with me, Megan Devine, on the Amy Brown Podcast Network. There's a lot going on lately, which is a massive understatement. It's a really human thing to hope that things get better, even when you're not sure how they possibly could. Join me for conversations with interesting people about difficult things, with new episodes of Hereafter with Megan Devine every Monday on the Amy Brown Podcast Network, available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.